Okay, so what you can see here is that very fine tube and some rod that I've put through it. I had to drill through this fine tube using a center drill and then a very fine drill. This is fine stuff, and I've made two of these, and these are to go in the side of the gun in order for me to be able to put the crank handles in place, if that's what it's called. So what I'm doing now, you can see the overall plan, is I'm taking some of the solid brass, bending it round a drill of around about the right thickness so that I can get these nice consistent rests. Now this is the plan. We put the rod into the bench. I just want to make sure that the other pieces are all exactly the same length above the bench, because that will ensure that my angle is identical on each of these pieces that I make. So I've just marked the bench, as you can see. I'm just marking the pieces of rod, and now we put the rod in up to the mark, bend it across, get that in the right place. This one's all a bit loose, it's the last one, you see. Then we silver solder it, and honestly, this is very fine stuff. It doesn't take long to heat this at all. So that's the flux in place. Now we just use the silver solder, and not yet. That's it, done. That's another one. So now I'm going to take these, like I suggested before, and just bend these so they're at right angles, and I'm just going to mimic that with each of the little parts that I'm making here. I've got them all done. That's step 2, I guess. Now, once again, holding them in place. The reason, as you can see, I made those half round pieces so long was so that I could hold them precisely like that. Nice little, there's a bit too much on there, but never mind. That's the silver solder. Now I can take these off. I've got them all done. And the beauty of this is that it is really quite fine. Any scratch-built guns that I've seen tend not to be quite fine enough, and doing this fine really makes it look really good. So I'm just going to do these all at the same size, and you can see how I'm doing that. Now the base can come off. And basically now we've got all of our little holders in place. And these are the pieces of tube that I have silver soldered together. And these are now going to fit into the side of the main body of the gun. Just cutting these down to size, don't need that much length. Okay. That's the old gun that you can see there. This is much finer, much nicer. So now I'm making the central block for the gun, and I have milled a piece of plastic, as you can see, to the right size. Now using a finer mill just to take the center section out where the actual gun barrel is going to protrude. Once again, you've got to make sure that when you're milling that the rotational cut doesn't pull the work toward itself. I hope that's self-explanatory. But with plastic, nothing really is much of a problem. If that did occur, you'd just be throwing it away. So I'm now just going to drill some holes in my base, which are a very neat fit for my tubing. And once again, using a compound slide in a drill. I've said this so many times. If you haven't seen my videos, you wouldn't have seen me say this so many times, but honestly, it makes such a difference to your ability to make small parts. That's it, all done. Now I'm putting a center drill into this piece of brass on the lathe. I've got a steady in one end, and I'm now just starting to cut the gun down to size. I'm not too fussed. There's a bit of a taper in the gun, so I'm using a file just to create that. As long as it's nice and smooth, it really doesn't matter. And now I have made in the lathe this piece of brass, and the plan for this is to put tube through it. So I've drilled it so that it will fit the tube, so that it will make the upper construction that fits on the top of the gun. I'm not going to try and recreate that. It's far too complex. But what you can see here is, if my fingers were still in frame, is I'm putting the valve, they're actually wheels off an old model tank, but I'm using them here, and they look pretty darn good. And that's obviously how the gun is adjusted. And I'm putting those on first, and then in go the rests. And it looks, I think it looks extraordinary, really. Now this is the base. I've glued the base on, and in fact what I ended up doing was putting a screw through the bottom of the hull, through the top deck, into the plastic to hold all of that in place. So there it is. There are the, I suppose they're like shock absorbers. I've put in the gun, the back section on the gun, and some this string is wound around the barrel as they did in the U-boats. Not string, obviously. There was some electrical issue, I think. And here I am. I'm going to glue this now onto the deck, and I'm also going to screw it. This is not going to move ever again. But I'm just thrilled with this. It hasn't taken too long to make, and in my view, not in your view because you can't see through my jumper, but in my view this is pretty bloody good. Bit more. That's it. Very nice. All it needs now is a touch of paint.